send that to me privately, that would be great, throughout the evening. And then we'll plan to go till 9 o'clock unless you have no questions. And then we'll wrap things up and then that'll be it. So Heavenly Father, thank you for tonight, the opportunity to be together, and just pray that you would be in our session. Thank you that all wisdom comes from you, and we want to learn from you, and we want to know your ways and to walk in your ways. Thank you for Elizabeth and the years of training and the years of interactions that she's had with people that has helped her to know how to be a wise counselor. And so, Lord, may all those things come to bear as she shares with us tonight. Bless her. Thank you for, I just think I'm reminded now of all the people right now that come to her and seek godly wisdom for the things that they're facing. And not only now, but probably more now than maybe in a long time. So Lord, I pray her plate, I'm sure, is heavy. Thank you that she has taken time to be with us. And I pray, Lord, that she would feel her load lifted. And just bless her tonight, we pray in Jesus' name. Amen. So we're really glad to have with us tonight Elizabeth Reynolds is a wonderful counselor, and she's going to share a little bit, and then we'll start into some questions. Okay? Welcome, Elizabeth.
Thank you, and thank you for your prayer for all of us. Alana, question, do I just leave mine unmuted and then you'll mute me when the time comes? Okay, good. Okay. I just want to, it's been 2 weeks since I last met with you folks, and I hope you all continue to be well. Many of you are likely feeling like you need a second wind to keep going like this. The isolation is no longer a new adventure, it's rather more of a drudgery. And so I just want to normalize that. That's perfectly normal to be feeling this way. And it's part of the process. I would like to address situations by category. And the first category I think I'd like to speak to is those living in a family situation. Many of you by now are probably feeling some impatience or irritability with each other, and I want to assure you that that's normal. This is intense living right now, and you can't get away from each other, and so it's very normal to be experiencing some of that irritability, some of that impatience. For those with young children, what I have to say as far as coping with young children right now, I want to thank my friend and colleague, Michelle Bentley. She is a child and family therapist here in Ottawa, and she just gave me some tips for coming out of her work with children to pass on to you tonight. First of all, speaking about structure, and so much of the structure that children are used to is gone right now at this time. And so she had suggested that it may be a good idea, particularly if you have young children, that you encourage them to make a family calendar, a calendar where the young ones can cross off the days. They can mark down interesting or satisfying achievements and be able to predict when family phone calls or online chats will happen. This gives them some sense of predictability, some sense of continuation and being held. If your kids are finding it difficult to settle into the school time, or you're stressed about how to support them, it is good to remember, first of all, that you are supporting your children's school work and time right now. Your primary role is that of parent. And so being a parent comes first. Teachers have some idea of mental health issues, and they will and can be flexible. Right now, your primary role is to be parent and where you are able to support their schoolwork. Another thing to remember is to connect before you correct your child. How you do that may include helping them to identify what their emotions are and to comfort them. For example, you may help them by saying something like, you're frustrated because you don't want to do it or you don't know how to do it. And so you are helping them express what they are feeling, showing empathy for them before you correct them. Next, take a break and move around and do some breathing frequently. Exercise. Exercise with your kids. Make sure that you set a schedule so that everyone has their time on the internet and on devices so that nobody is feeling like their needs don't matter. Be as positive as you can with your kids. Remind them that they are living through a unique historical event when the whole world came together to support each other by staying home to keep people healthy. That's positive. That's reinforcing what is good, and it helps children with any anxiety they may feel around this. Take a parental dysfunction day if you need it. Reduce expectations on yourself. If you have an outside play area or a rec room, send your kids there to play and you do something for you. Other ideas are to set aside an hour or more a day when each family member has their own private space where they go to. It may be in the same room with somebody else, but it's their space where they go to read, to color, to work on Lego, to work on a video game. And during that time, you as parent, do something for you. We are sometimes asked whether children will struggle with routine when things get back to normal. The general rule of thumb is if your child struggles with routine normally, then they will struggle with routine when it's time to get back to school. So just accept that. That's one of your child's struggles, and it's not abnormal for them, but they will eventually get back into it. A couple of resources for parents of youth. One is a website. The website is jack.org/COVID. And the other is an app. And the app is called Mind Shift. One word, the Mind Shift app. And both of those can be a resource for parents. For those of us who may be living alone during times of isolation is only going to stir up any sense of loss or grief that we have been carrying. So if you've been struggling with being alone, living alone already during this isolation, you're going to struggle even more. If you recently lost a spouse, or it may not be recently, it may be several years ago. What happens following a loss, you found ways of coping that incorporated new and more intense activities and relationships. In isolation, they're not there in the same way. And the earlier loss comes back. You can't change it, but just realize that it is normal. And life will resume in some form of normal, and those supports will also resume. And then finally, for couples, you may have concerns about reentry following the isolation. And I just want to encourage you to sit down together and evaluate how you've been doing during this time of isolation. Evaluate what weaknesses have come to the fore, what strengths have come to the fore that you've begun to realize you have in your relationship. Evaluate what you've learned about yourselves. What actually has maybe been good, has been a good thing during this time of isolation. God's word has promised us that nothing comes to his children, those who are called according to his purpose, his word says, that he will not bring some good. And during this time of isolation, God's mercy and grace has been there, and we do well to evaluate what that is. So if you're a couple, you may want to evaluate what's been good in this. Maybe you're praying together and you haven't for years. Maybe you're reading God's word together, or reading a book together, or just having more time of connection. And you want to embrace that and see how you can continue to keep that going when this time of isolation is past. For all of us, whether we be single, couples, families, whatever we want to remember that God is good, and that there are some good things coming out of this. And we want to embrace those good things and to expect and look forward to what he's going to do in the days when this isolation begins to peter out and we come into some new kind of normalcy. So I hope some of that is encouraging. I hope some of that is helpful. And I'm certainly willing to take any questions that come. Hopefully I can answer them.
Yes. Okay. Well, I'm going to say I'm sure you can, but there may be some questions. Who knows, right? So yeah. So right now, listen, if you've just joined us, and so for the format for this evening, if you'd like to ask a question, we're going to keep everybody muted, but if you'd like to ask a question, you can send a chat to me. You do that through the bottom of your screen, and you can just send that to me privately, or I guess you can send it to everyone, but you can send it to me privately, and I would be happy to make sure that I share those with everyone. And also, we're recording tonight, so if you'd not like to be part of the recording, because we're going to post it up to our YouTube channel, then you can just stop the video down at the bottom. Okay, so I do know, so some questions. Let me just take a look here. And if you have other questions, make sure you send them here. Do that as soon as you can. That would be wonderful. I guess one of them was tips on how to deal with people in self-isolation when I can't get away from them. Do you have any thoughts on that, Elizabeth?
Laura. If you literally can't get away from them, the only thing you may be able to do is try to create that quiet time for everybody. That would be the only thing I can think of, is institute a quiet time every day, so that they may be in the house, they may even be in the room, but you're in a space where you can pull in, and you set those boundaries with the kids. You know, you set the alarm clock so they can see. And during this time, mommy or daddy is not available unless the house is on fire, and we're all going to have our quiet time. Now, with some children, if they're not used to that kind of structure, that may be harder to bring about. You may have to start it in 5-minute increments or something like that. And by the time the isolation period is over, you may be up to an hour.
So, sorry that I have to say this, but my wife is saying that it might not be a child that's the problem.
Very good, Julie.
Thank you for mentioning that. Not that that would be a problem for us in finding a spot where we get to self-isolate.
It's just keeping you there, Mike.
Pardon me?
It's keeping you in that spot.
Yeah, that's exactly true. So yeah, the dance that we're doing, and I'm sure others are doing in terms of with Zoom calls, they're working from home and they're trying to find a spot where they can do their work. They're not used to this. There's a lot of things that are out of normal. It feels strange, and it's trying to learn how to process all that and make. You're negotiating. Maybe we haven't had to negotiate as much as we are having to do right now.
I'm sure we haven't, because over the years we have compromised relationship for space in some ways. Our homes get bigger and bigger. And so we tend to have more space around us. It's during these times of isolation that it feels like the home isn't big enough, perhaps, because everybody is home all at once, all together. And so it may be the same relatively decent sized house that you're in, but it doesn't feel quite as big.
No.
Yeah.
So before, you might have had the opportunity to avoid something and perhaps run away from a situation because you had the space.
Mm-hmm.
Now we really can't go anywhere, so you've got to kind of deal with it, or at least, try to make peace. Do you think that after this, do you think that are you anticipating your workload going up, and are you already seeing that your workload is going up because of what we're in?
I'm not seeing it going up right now, but I am seeing that well, I shouldn't say that. I've had a few former clients return in the last week or two, so that may be part of it. But I really think when this is over, that's when the workload is going to go up, because a lot of people don't want to do Zoom sessions. They want to do in person, so they're holding off.
Yes.
Holding back until they can do that. And when the worst of this is over, that's when we're going to see frontline workers who now have time to breathe and are going to need support.
Right. Right. So then do you think that maybe then with what some people are facing right now in their relationships, that they certainly should be making mental note of what's maybe the triggers, so some of the things that are happening, so that at some point they would reach out and get help, because right now the spotlight is really focused on what's going on in that relationship, and in reality, it may move them ahead in terms of really needing to deal with it. So maybe if they can just make note of what was kind of going on, maybe that would help in terms of the dealing with it later.
I would encourage everyone, even if it's not a relationship issue, I would encourage everyone. We've been into this for 7 full weeks now.
Wow.
Yeah. And I would encourage everyone to sit down, whether you do it with your spouse or whether you just do it on your own, and evaluate. Like, evaluate, what have I seen about myself? What have I seen about our relationship? What strengths have I seen that surprised me? What weaknesses did I not realize were there? Evaluate how we cope, how we deal with conflict, how I on my own have dealt with this. You can do this all by yourself. What where have I seen God's grace abound towards me during this?
Mhm.
Where that self-evaluation, I think, is key. It will enrich this experience for us. It will enrich the coming out of this experience for us as we are much more self-aware, and heading into back out into the world and into the marketplace again.
Right. Sometimes I see another question come up here. Um, I think sometimes we get quotes off of the internet. I believe this is true. Winston Churchill said, "Never to waste a crisis."
Mm.
And I think that's probably a crude way, but it is also, we have this opportunity, as hard as it is, that hopefully we will learn something from it. And as what you're saying, to take those notes would be a great way to do that. And observing what's happening if we're in with kids, what's going on with them and how they're interacting and moving through this too.
What have I learned about my child during this time? What has my child learned about their mother, their father during this time?
Yes.
That kind of thing can be very rich. It can be a little bit disturbing at times, but we do it not to beat up on ourselves, but to put us in a place of opportunity for growth.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Not to be wasted, for sure. Yeah. Okay. So I have another question, and it is, we do believe that at some point we're going to come up out of this.
Mhm.
And I'm just wondering, maybe for relationships or for people kind of getting ready, or there's some things that we can start to do in our relationships to get us ready to kind of, when these restrictions are, lifted a little bit. Will there be anything that we should be kind of getting ready when the door opens up and we're free? What is there anything that we should be getting ourselves ready for in our relationships?
I had a gentleman tell me years ago that when you let the cows out of the barn in the spring, they literally dance.
They do. That's right.
You know that. And that's the picture I get of us. Unfortunately, it's probably not going to go from being unsafe to being totally safe. And so it's going to be a little bit staggered. But that sense, that longing that we have is probably much like those poor cows feel in the spring. We just want to get out. In preparation for that, I think partly is if couples are particularly evaluating what have they learned during this time, what has been good in their relationship that maybe wasn't very present in their relationship before, and then they discuss ways that they can ensure that that remains present. Simple things like praying together. um, you know Couples can do that when they get back to work and they get back into the stores and all the rest of it. That
Hmm.
will happen if there's a commitment to making it happen.
Right.
And so whatever you see as the things that have been good through this, then discuss how are you going to keep them present.
That
Uh, Sorry, Mike.
makes a lot of sense. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. That comes back to the, what are the things that we're learning through this process, and the things that we really do need to take with us
Mhm.
into the future. That makes a lot of sense.
I've spoken to a number of people that are saying that they're talking more than they ever used to. And so if that's a clue. If that makes you feel better about your relationship, that's a clue that you need to make that time happen going forward. So whatever it happens to be.
Right. Okay. I don't know whether you fully answered this question earlier, but we were talking about, there was a question that was raised about grief, and, it happened a while ago and you're feeling it again. You want to talk at all about, or can you talk at all about this whole notion of compounding grief? The last time we were together, you talked about how the whole sense of loss, and we're getting it's pressing in from all all different places. And could that also be contributing to these feelings of grief that you have about a loved one that passed away years ago, and it's resurfacing? Is this part of this whole compounding grief that we're feeling, or?
It could be. We know that when we have experience a loss and we don't fully grieve through it, that when the next loss comes along, we've now added to the first loss. And with loss upon loss, it becomes compound grief or complex grief. It becomes more complex because you've got unresolved grief from before and now you're into another loss. And so a lot of people would have multiple losses that maybe because of circumstances, because of the ways in which they learned to cope in their home growing up or whatever, they never fully walked through that loss. They interrupted it somewhere along the line and didn't fully go through it. And so now it's coming up while they're experiencing now the losses of this situation. So yeah, so it's compounded, and the compoundedness of it makes it more complex, because what grief am I dealing with in any given moment?
Right. So are you sensing now in what you're doing and talking to people, are you seeing very much of this pop up in what you're in what you're dealing with, or
It's so common just to see old grief come up when there's a new one. So I haven't been consciously thinking about, oh, this is unusual. I think this is very usual.
mhm.
Any unresolved grief is going to be coming up now. It just is. Um, uh, and I think it's good to normalize it.
Right.
And it may be a sign that I need to go back to the first grief or the second grief. Well, how many more? Go back and see what I need to fully process that. It may be I need to see a professional counselor to unpack all of that.
Yes.
Mhm.
You know what I have found so helpful over the years, I mean, for both Julie and I, is to have someone that that is able to look from the outside into what's going on in my life or in our lives, and just see it from a different perspective, and be able to offer counsel and to begin to ask some questions that begins to untangle some of these things. And often when that happens, you just find that your things begin to make sense. The things begin, it's actually like a puzzle that starts to click, and then you get a couple pieces and away you go. So I totally concur with what you're saying there in terms of the whole counseling piece.
Yes. I have a girlfriend, she lost her mother when she was 14, and she didn't fully grieve the loss of her mother until she was struggling with infertility. And so you can see how the grief upon grief now became more complex for her. And she had to work with someone to unpack some of that. There's a lot of grief right now going on many layers. And so it makes sense that old, unprocessed, unresolved griefs are going to complicate what I'm grieving right now.
Right, right. All right, good. Thank you. Do you have any tips or suggestions in terms of helping people deal with stress and anxiety? There seems to be a fair amount of that. I was just, I was on a prayer call before this, and there's the sense was that there's a lot of people that are anxious, and there's all this stuff going on, or there's a few things that would help us to begin to untangle some of that.
So I would go back and review what we talked about a couple of weeks ago.
Yep.
Um, to add to that, I would suggest the more variety you can have in your life right now, probably the better it is for coping with anxiety. In other words, if you are spending, by the way, a lot of people are complaining that looking at a monitor all day long is really hard on them. People are starting now to report sleep issues and things like that. The first couple of weeks it was okay, but now they're getting into week 8 and they're starting to have insomnia and so on and so forth. And I think a lot of it is looking at a monitor all day long. And so I think, and that can create anxiety. So I would encourage people to get up from their monitor and walk away, do some breathing, do a little bit of stretching, step outside if you can, breathe some fresh air, and before coming back to it. And do that frequently, do that every hour for sure. And then, as I said, as much variety as you can. Myself, along with others I've spoken to, have struggled with reading. They just, normally they like to read, but they just couldn't get into a book. I finally gave up on getting into a serious book. I normally have 3 or 4 books on the go, all on different areas of my interest. And I gave up on it. And I pulled out a couple of old novels and I got into them. And so I realize right now, I need to be, for my downtime, I need to be reading something it may be a good reading, but it's not serious reading. Something that takes me out of the current situation and gives me a little break from it. Music. Music is so important to a lot of people, probably to most people, but a lot of people don't realize how important it is to them. But music, listen to music. If you play an instrument or you sing, try to get back into doing some of that. If you're an artist, get back into your painting or whatever it happens to be. We've taken a break for all these weeks. Now we're starting to feel the loss of not having these things in our lives. And so it's really important that we bring them back in. Going to a restaurant really isn't that important. Being with people is important, but going to a restaurant isn't. But music in your life, art in your life, literature in your life, these things are important. And so I don't know how people are experiencing this. Are you like others that I've spoken to where you're just struggling to read, you're struggling to get into anything serious, and maybe you need to look at another form of literature, another form of music or something like that?
Yeah, for sure. I think why don't on the chat side there, why don't you just write out some of the things that you're finding to be helpful there, you folks. Just what are you finding to be helpful, and what are some of the things where you've kind of said, you know what, I need to kind of lay that aside because that isn't helping me. It's actually taking energy, and I'm not moving in a positive direction. I'm actually moving in a negative direction. I heard someone say, Elizabeth, they were talking about the fact that, this is going to be so cool. We're going to be able to be at home. This is going to be just wonderful. And then, we're a week, 2 weeks in, and then it's turning out this wasn't quite like I thought it was going to be. And then, now, as you mentioned, I hardly thought it was 49. It feels more like 200, but, a long time as far as a long time away. So, we're trying to figure out the things that are giving us energy and those things that are sucking the energy out of us. At one time, it might be good to watch television and sort of veg out, but after a couple nights of that, it kind of gets old. And now there isn't great programming anyways with that.
Yes. Yeah, when we think of, wow, we're going to be off work, we think of being in holiday mode and being able to come and go and do all those things that we want to do. But obviously, that's not what this is about. And so, and the heaviness of it. Um, my sister sent me a picture of a t shirt that says 2020 is a unique leap year. It has 29 days in February, 300 days in March, and 5 years in April. A lot of people may be feeling that.
Yes, yes, yeah. So I have a just a statement, and it has to do with someone that's is an introvert, has is working through some social phobia. This has not been so bad, but this is going to lift, and restrictions are going to be lifted. And then when that happens, how best can someone begin to prepare to be back out with people again? That's
So, boundaries. I'll just stay with boundaries.
yeah.
That person is going to need to ease themselves back in and set boundaries. Tell the people that they feel safe enough to tell, this is what I'm doing. Don't push me, don't pressure me. I need to do this gradually.
Yes.
And for we as family and friends, I think it's important that we respect that everybody will have a different timeline for getting back out there. Some people are going to be slower at it. Some people are, the introverts are not going to want to be pressured to be at every function, every possible coffee meet and everything else. They're going to want to do this more gradually.
Mm-hmm. How challenging do you think it's going to be for us as humans to move from, we have to be 6 feet apart, and I know this will be gradual, but from being 6 feet apart to, the point of maybe hugs and those types of things? Like how are we going to manage that? Do you think in the coming days, weeks, and maybe a year?
I think that's, again, it's an individual thing, and boundaries are important.
Right.
Respecting another person's boundaries and being able to enforce my own, so that I may not be as comfortable with it. I may need weeks and maybe even months to get comfortable with it. And so I ask you to respect that and not push it.
Yeah.
Um,
And do you think this is challenging? I mean, as Canadians, we're known as kind of, for many anyways, we say, excuse me and sorry, and boundaries is probably a tough thing for a lot of people. And maybe we've learned to do it better, or maybe we've walked away from it during this time.
Yeah, I'm not sure that we've gotten better at it. We may have gotten better at it as we got desperate to keep people to have some personal space, but with others, it's not easy. With our immediate family that we're living with, maybe, but not with others. I think there needs to be conversation about how this is going to be different for everybody. Everybody's going to have their own timeline. It doesn't mean that I think you're contagious, or I think, you're going to make me sick, but I just need this time to get till I feel more comfortable. Or the person who's wanting to push it. I've got someone in my life that would be quite happy to be coming over here every day, and so I have to set that boundary. Have a conversation about it.
Yes.
I know it's hard for us. We are hesitant to confront things, but everybody, it's not just me alone that's maybe having this struggle. So that makes it harder for me to confront it. But if I recognize that there are a lot of people that may be having the same struggle,
Right.
um, hopefully it gives us permission to put it out there, put it on the table. You know, when we're finally allowed to get back to church, let's say, the first thing a lot of people are going to want to do is hug. And the last thing some people are going to want to do is hug. And so maybe we need to have open conversation, even in a church setting.
Mm.
You know, let's give people their space to come to their own comfort level.
Right. I mean, this is very timely because there's a committee that's meeting, task force, to think about reentry. What does that look like? Even though it's perhaps a little ways away, and so what you're talking about is very helpful, and we can certainly help our people to be prepared for that when it comes time for that. And you mentioned about some people not wanting hugs. Someone did private message me and say, I don't want any hugs. Keep them away from me.
There you go.
So maybe
And
it's a t-shirt. Maybe they need to have a t-shirt on that says, I don't want any hugs, maybe.
maybe. And I think people need to there needs to be open dialogue about it, and maybe some instruction from the top, so that people who want to continue wearing a mask, and others don't, that if there's no regulation about having to wear a mask, which there may be initially, but when that's relaxed, that it's okay for that person who wants to continue it.
Yeah.
Because it's actually traumatizing to another person to force a hug on them, or to force them not wearing a mask or whatever, those things, if they're not ready. And it doesn't help relationships. We know that won't help any relationship. So we may as well be upfront and open about it.
Mm-hmm. Won't that be an interesting, I don't know, a social experiment as we're moving forward of learning how to work through this?
Yes, it will be. Can I just say one thing before I forget it? For couples, there may be differences within the couple relationship. So one part of the relationship may want to continue wearing masks, and the other part doesn't see the value in it. So what do you do then? I would encourage couples to talk about it, and probably initially, at least initially, the one who is most cautious is the one that we need to honor, and adjust to that one that's most cautious. So if my wife feels that they're more comfortable with me wearing a mask going out and coming home or something like that, at least initially accommodate that.
Mm-hmm.
And then over time, of course, there needs to be more discussion about it, but at least initially accommodate the most cautious of the two.
That sounds very wise. Yeah. Listen, if there's anyone out there who has any other questions, or you have any comments about what Elizabeth has said so far, write that in the chat. That would be wonderful.
Or complaints.
Yeah, that's right. We'll receive those here. I'll be selective in those that I pass on. So, I think there was, trying to think whether there was any other questions that we had. Okay, is everyone had their questions answered? Any other concerns that you have? Ideas? Elizabeth, do you have any suggestions for books? For people, as far as what they might be able to read or pick up on? I don't know what you think of Henry Cloud, a book on boundaries. Is that a
good book? The book on safe people is also very good. Same authors.
Yes.
And Cloud. Anything. since I've confessed to you that I've had trouble reading until I picked up a couple of novels, I don't have anything that I'm currently reading that I can say would be helpful other than an escape.
Right. Right. Yes.
Daniel Silva's Gabriel Allen series is a great series.
Right.
I'm not sure that trying to read anything that's instructive, that's learning too much right now, most people have the capacity for.
Right.
Most, I can't think of anybody that I've spoken to in these last weeks that is telling me they're having a great time reading the instructive stuff.
That's helpful. Yeah.
It just seems like it's one more thing on us. And we've got enough right now. Mhm.
That makes sense. Perfect sense. Can you, what's the website again that was for the children? Jack?
Yeah, just let me bring it up. jack.org/COVID.
Yeah.
JACK.org/COVID.
Okay, someone had asked that.
Okay.
Okay, so here's a great question. I manage to stay occupied, but at times I feel very useless, and that I find very hard. And I find that very hard. I can spiral into despair because of that. So any helpful ideas about how to work through that? Maybe that's kind of a two-parter, like in terms of the why the feeling and how the person's kind of processing that.
If this person is living alone, perhaps, certainly that's very clear that, probably by now you've cleaned out your closets and you've done all those spring cleaning type things that you thought you could get done during this time. Either that or you haven't been able to get to any of them. And so without the regular interaction, this person may be a doer. They may be someone who finds meaning in their life from doing for others. And if that's the case, right now is going to be very difficult. But God has allowed you this season, and He wants to bring something good in it for you.
Mm-hmm.
And so it may be that you just need some quiet time to find your value and your worth, not in what you do, but in who you are. To plan, perhaps, for going forward when this is beginning to relax. How do you want to spend your time in those things that bring meaning and purpose to your life? For some personalities, reflective time is torture. For personalities, reflective time is threatening. So that's understood. So it will be difficult, but at least try it. At least try it. See, and it may be an opportunity to be spending more time with the Lord, in that learning who you are as a child, and that's where your worth and your value comes from. Preparing your strength for when you can get back out there.
Yep. Yeah. Good. Sounds very, very wise. Someone just wants to share a tip that's related to the, I think instead of the screen time, instead of watching, it's watching webinars and so on. It's actually listening to them. so you don't have that. So you may just sit in your favorite chair, and instead of watching it, you're internalizing it by just hearing. That's
Very,
that
very,
would,
yeah.
or podcast, yeah, whatever, things like that. I don't know, is there anything else that you wanted to mention, Elizabeth? I mean, that's pretty much most of the questions that have come in for us tonight. I do want to recommend to the folks that if you want to have further opportunity to talk about some of these things, I think that it's invaluable to be able to spend time with someone, as I said, that can look from the outside into your situation, either personally or in your relationships, to help you to process and to untangle some things and to help you make sense of some things. And maybe they've come to the forefront right now because of the pressure that we're feeling living in this particular situation right now. So I just want to suggest to you that if you want to reach out to someone, to be happy to help you make a connection with Elizabeth, and we'd be happy to do that. So you can either contact me directly or Pastor Linda, and we would make sure that that connection's made. Is that the best way, do you think, Elizabeth, for that to happen?
Yes, I think so.
Yeah.
Right now.
Yeah. Okay. Is there anything else that you wanted to say tonight before we?
I can't think of anything except it really is a privilege for me to join you folks. It's good for me too, and,
Okay.
and I appreciate it. You're a good group, and certainly I am available in any way that would be helpful, um, either right now during these times or in the days ahead.
Wonderful. Awesome. Well, I think we will wrap up. What we can do is we will stop the recording.